So for our last topic, we will discuss the incident response procedures. Now in this module, we will complete the following exercise, which is the incident response planning. And after completing this module, we should be able to define and describe appropriate incident response planning, proper planning techniques, proper response techniques. We'll also explore incident response template documentation. For our first exercise, this will be about incident response planning. Now, as an organization grows, it is important for IT staff to plan ahead and be strategic for cases where incidents may happen that threaten infrastructure and the business from running smoothly. Now, when planning for these incidents, it is imperative to consider anything that may put an infrastructure at risk or at risk of failure and have an appropriate response to remediate the issue rather than working reactionarily, which typically leads to more downtime. Now, this becomes more important and equally difficult to gauge as infrastructures become larger and more intricate. For example, an infrastructure engineer may push an update through to a live environment that safely passes through dev and QA environments, only to find that it causes an effect on a legacy resource. In the worst cases, where that resource was a single point of failure, this can bring down the entire infrastructure. Now, for the incident response planning, it involves the following stages. Number 1 is preparation. Number 2, identification. 3 is containment. 4 is investigation. 5 is eradication. 6 is recovery. And lastly, 7 is follow-up. Now, when it comes to incident response planning, our first action would be documentation. To plan effectively, you must ensure that the proper resources, tools, and assets are available to use in an emergency. Now, this includes prudent documentation such as the following. So, one is communication plan or call tree. This will provide a list of contact details for key stakeholders to alert them of an incident as it happens. Number 2 is monitoring plans. Now, monitoring should be done and reviewed frequently to ensure there are no indicators of incidents. Now, without this, it can be more difficult to pinpoint a root cause and begin remediation work. Third is decision plans or roles and responsibilities. Now, it should be outlined clearly who would have authority for any decisions that may have to be made when investigating an issue. This should be a senior person who can, provided they are given the best information, can decide on how to move forward with an incident and sign off remediation work. However, this same hierarchical concept applies to all in a response team, and everyone should be aware of their responsibilities when dealing with an incident. And lastly is individual processes. You should also relay a potential response to different incidents before they have happened. Without this, determining the best course of action will be more difficult. Although not everything can be planned for, everything should be considered a potential risk factor when building an infrastructure. Now, the exact documentation and wording, however, will likely change from business to business. Our next topic is about training and tabletops. Now, for staff to have the most competent response to any incident, it is key to ensure that regular training exercises are performed and that staff are prepared to face anything. This can be done in different ways and can include tabletop exercises in which an incident is simulated and hands-on training is provided when instructing staff to remediate this issue. Another one would be scope. Now, scoping out incidents is key when performing detection and analysis on an infrastructure. Now, as it is imperative to understand that what will be affected by a detected issue. Now, for example, a virus infecting a client device on a network may or may not put an entire infrastructure at risk and should be scoped out accordingly. Another one would be documented incident types or categories. Now, how many organization categorizes different threats will be different. Although there are industry standards in evaluating the threat of potential incidences, typically judged via the scope of the impact or the overall threat it plays to the business. Now, to take an earlier example, a client plays to the business. Now, a client's device infected a simple virus may not be high on the scale if proper planning has taken place, and the scope has been judged to only affect that one machine and not put the infrastructure at risk. Alternatively, suppose a client device was targeted by a sophisticated cyber attack by someone who aims to take down your entire infrastructure or steal protected data, such as personally identifiable information. In that case, this could potentially be a much higher risk to the overall business and should be labeled accordingly. Now, different threats are typically broken down into the following categories. First one is low, which means low impact on overall business function. Second is medium or medium impact on business function, which could include SPOFs. And lastly, the high, which is a critical impact on business function, which could have long-lasting effects on the business as well as customer trust in that business. Our next topic is containment, eradication, and recovery. Now, this is the most important response planning phase and covers what work will be performed to remediate and eradicate an issue. Now, this phase is broken down into the following categories. So, the first one is containment. Firstly, a threat's impact on a business should immediately be limited. This could be as simple as isolating a specific device or an entire sections of an infrastructure. Eradication. Secondly, the root cause of the issue should be removed. This can take any form, but should be agreed by stakeholders and executed accordingly. Recovery will be the last, and any damage to an infrastructure should be reverted to a safe point. Because of this, it is imperative that failovers and backups exist and are updated as often as outlined by a business. Lastly, lessons learned. Now, once an incident has been eradicated and recovery procedures have been enacted, the final stage is to review the process thoroughly and hold the business's collected reaction accountable. This can be done through a lessons learned discussion, in which key stakeholders will show where the response was performed adequately and which areas may need work if this happens again. Now, these then feed back into the planning phase to ensure the process is iterative and always improving. Now, in this exercise, we will investigate a template incident response procedure. Now, our first task is to review a template incident response documentation. Now, various documents comprise incident response planning, and the exact documentation will vary from business to business. In this task, we will review some example documents that can be used in incident response planning. Now from the taskbar, let's open the File Explorer. And under Quick Access, click Documents and double-click the Incident Response Planning Template Excel file. Step 4 is close the Microsoft Office Professional Plus 2016 wizard. Now once the Excel file, it will open on the threat organization matrix. Now here you can see an example of different threat classifications based on the probability of the issue occurring versus the impact it would create or it would have on an infrastructure. So the exact specifications here will change from business to business, although there are 4 categories here. For example, we have low, medium, high, and priority 1 high. Now step 5, let's click on the Monitoring Plan tab. Now this tab displays a simple monitoring sheet that outlines different resources that comprise a wider infrastructure, including resource description, a judge of the risk, backup details, and if it is part of a wider infrastructure or a standalone resource. Now let's scroll to the right of the page to view the remaining data. And you can see multiple potential concerns. For example, in one of the machines, an Azure Key Vault does not have any infrastructure relying on it directly. As noted in column G, and therefore has been declared as not a risk, although it has not been backed up for a year and a half before the other resources. Now this could indicate a SPOF, as the Key Vault could store business critical data. Now let's look at Call Tree and Decision Plan tab. Now this tab outlines a blank call tree in which different hierarchical levels are shown with fields for contact details. Now it outlines a plan of whom to communicate with in case of an incident, and could also potentially double up as an outline of roles and responsibility. Now in the given example, the director may be the person who can authorize decisions, and now let's close the Excel file. And now we've completed the incident response procedures.